The trade market is going to be hot this offseason. We're going to talk about 5 players that we think the Mets must trade for this offseason, guys that we think are available. Impact players, guys that will make this team better. Free agency market is great. We know there's some big names out there, but let's talk about the guys that the Mets can go out and trade for. One of the advantages of having as much money as the Mets, you can trade for bigger contracts that teams don't want to pay anymore. That's exactly what we're looking at. James, who do you want to start off with here at number 1?
I think number 1 is going to be probably the most compelling trade asset on the market. He was one of the most compelling trade assets on the market last deadline. He stayed put, but I think he's probably pretty available right now, and that's Garett Crochet from the White Sox. Just to reiterate, insanely unique asset. He's 25 years old. He has fewer than 250, 300 innings in his major league career. Last year, he was a superstar ace for the first half. They didn't trade him. Kind of just put him on ice in the second half because it was an innings jump that we had really not seen in the modern era. And for some reason, they called him up when he was so young because they thought they were good. Then he blew out his arm. And now he only has 2 years of team control left. And the White Sox are one of the most pitiful organizations in sports history. So it makes a lot of sense for them to trade him. But it's really hard to figure out what a trade package for him would look like just because, again, all those things I just said, hard to put a hard value on him because he's so damn good, but also so strange, obscure.
Yeah, the guys that we were looking at in terms of trade value is funny enough. Luis Castillo, Chris Sale. We even looked at David Price. I know he didn't have as much.
Johan Santana.
Johan Santana is another one. Chris Sale, to me, was the one that stuck out the most. But Chris Sale was also a pitcher that was a little bit more proven. He had a bunch of innings under his arm when he got traded to the Red Sox.
Many good years.
Yeah, many good years. So not as much or way more track record than Garett Crochet currently has. He was traded for the number 7 prospect in baseball at the time in Yoan Moncada, another top 100 prospect in Michael Kopech. It was a major, major trade. They gave up huge assets, some of the best prospects in baseball. You look at the Johan Santana trade, granted it happened almost 20 years ago, which feels really insane.
Horrible.
That doesn't feel good to say. At the time, Carlos Gomez was considered a top prospect. We know that never ended up panning out. And same thing with Philip Humber. I think he was one of the Mets' top prospects. But it is really hard to find a comp here. And you're also trading with the White Sox, who have gotten smarter, but are still a little bit far behind right now in terms of just organizational smartness. Intelligence, I think, is a better word to use.
Yeah, smartness over intelligence. That was a good way to show your own smartness. But the also big thing about Crochet is that he has 2 full years of team control, which is why he was such a big asset this past trade deadline, because he could have gone to a team and given them 3 different appearances and playoff runs. That was the key. Same with Juan Soto 2 years ago with the Padres. They're like, wow, Juan Soto could play in the playoffs for us 3 times. That's why you make that deal at that moment. But that's the thing with Crochet. It's hard to find any comparisons for starting pitchers that are even close to being this good that ever have 2 years of control on them, which is why I think a package would kind of fall,
And it's awkward, too, because he's really only had 1 season of being a starter at the major league level. And it was
3 months,
year,
really.
Yeah, of 146 innings, and they were disgusting. He had a whip basically at 1. His FIP was 2.69. In the 146 innings, he struck out 209 batters, which are some of the highest numbers in Major League Baseball, despite not having that many innings. The talent is out of control with Garett Crochet. There's no doubt there. But the lack of track record and the injury history and the contract that he has is so weird.
And the shape of the season was weird too. I mentioned it before, but once they decided they were going to trade him, they didn't trade him. He didn't give length the rest of the year. He didn't pitch more than 5 innings after July 1st in any start. So again, they kept him going, so he kept on his routine, and he was very steadfast that that's what he wanted to do. He didn't want to miss a long period of time. He didn't want to come out of the bullpen. He's like, let me stay in the routine. I'll just pitch less to keep the arm intact. But just that jump from this year throwing 146 innings to the year before only throwing 12. That is pretty significant. I think he also threw about 12 more minor league innings too that year. So went from 25 innings to 146 in 1 year. I don't know if that's particularly unsafe. It doesn't seem like the best thing, but it all seems like it did work out okay. And Terry Skubal did something like that 2 years ago, and this year he did it again and won the Cy Young, was the best pitcher on earth. But just the one thing I can't deny with Crochet is the stuff is just, it's completely insane. There's not many lefties who throw 97 miles an hour. His cutter's ridiculous. His slider's ridiculous. His changeup was coming along last year. The 2-seamer, he started throwing more towards the end of the year. It also looked really, really well in the small samples he threw it in. This looks like a guy who can just be one of the best pitchers in baseball for the next few years and be the number 1 starting pitcher on this Mets team instantly. So my question for you, what are you willing to trade for him?
Well, that was what I was going to bring up is I think you're going to have to give up a lot, not just because of who he is, but the Mets don't have that clear top prospect in baseball right now. Sproat is our highest ranked one according to Pipeline, and I think also Baseball America, he's around the 40-50 range. Jet Williams is around the top 50 range. Those are the 2 best prospects. Surely they're both going to be included in a Garett Crochet trade, along with maybe some MLB ready play, maybe a Ronnie Mauricio, maybe a Drew Gilbert type. I don't know. You're going to have to give up a lot to get Crochet. And that is the one thing I think could scare people, but also it's kind of hard to find a guy like Garett Crochet available.
Yeah, I almost think the move would be you have to give one or two of the major league ready position players, like a Jet, a Gilbert, a Mauricio. I don't know if they would want Brett Baty because they just basically did the Brett Baty thing with Miguel Vargas. So they just have to give Miguel Vargas a shot at third base. That's his best position rather than like try again immediately with Brett Baty. But I think they would want volume pitching. I think that's what they would want to bring in because last year they made the trade for Dylan Cease. They got Drew Thorpe and Jairo Iriarte, who both look like pitchers that are probably going to wind up with the major league team this year. Thorpe had some ups and downs when he came up. Not the biggest Thorpe guy, but it seems to me like you would probably have to just smother them with Sproat, Blade, Tong, McLean. Like you would probably have to give like a volume thing, which if you look at those two trades we talked about before, which are Sale and Luis Castillo, the Sale trade was really an enigma because those were two of the top 10 prospects in baseball at the time. What?
How did we miss the Dylan Cease trade as the comp?
Yeah, I guess the Dylan Cease trade would have been a good comp. But Cease is a different comp because Cease was in the league a long time, and he arguably never had the high that Garett Crochet had last year, right? You could probably say that fairly.
I mean, he had a 2.2 ERA and 184 innings in 22. Like, he was disgusting in 2022. He finished second in the Cy Young voting.
Yeah, that's true. And he was coming off a bit of a down year. I guess Cease kind of was probably more similar comp, but because with the extra year of team control.
Which makes me feel better that he's maybe more realistic to get because I think you can match that Cease trade back.
And that's what they wanted. I think that's why I think it's going to come back to pitching. I think you give them one of those major league-ish ready hitting assets, and then you kind of play pitching off that. So maybe you can get away with if you give them Sproat, you don't have to give them Jet. You give them Sproat, Gilbert, Tidwell. I would do that in a second. I think that's probably light. That's probably light. You probably have to do those two maybe in Tong or McLean, someone with a little more upside than Tidwell. But
and I'd still do that in a heartbeat.
Maybe you have to do more though, because these prospects probably aren't as good as what other teams could offer prospect wise. You know, like possibly, that's where the play of this kind of comes in. But like maybe you have to give up 4 of these prospects. Like when the Reds traded Castillo, they got back Noelvi Marte, Edwin Arroyo, and Levi Stout. And there's one more guy in there, but all kind of wound up being nothing kind of pieces.
Connor Phillips, was he part of it as well?
I think that was one of the different ones.
Okay. Well, regardless, they gave up a decent amount.
Yeah, but a decent amount, but there wasn't anything that blew you away for a guy like Luis Castillo, who was on top of his game, another full year of control, basically an opportunity to give you 2 playoff runs, which is what Crochet is going to be able to give.
Also, the next player we're going to talk about here, too, Luis Castillo of the Seattle Mariners. Good segue there, James. Way to bring him up at the right time. Luis Castillo, we've mentioned on a couple different podcast episodes and videos. The Mariners have a plethora of pitching, like literally more than anybody in the entire world. They just have unlimited arms. All of them are really good. Luis Castillo is expensive, and that money that they could save on moving a Luis Castillo contract could really help them out on the offensive side, which they are dreadful at.
Yeah, and not expensive. He's due. I'm loading the contract right now.
He's Seattle expensive.
Seattle expensive. More Seattle expensive is kind of the fact that they can move some assets around. Like if you can get rid of Castillo, and we can give you again like a major league ready baseball player. Like they're a team who's at third base for them right now.
Yeah, exactly. Josh Rojas.
That's saying so they're a team who Brett Baty has some real value for, and then you do Brett Baty plus another close major league ready kind of guy, and it's like, all right, we're trading major league players back and forth. It makes a lot of sense, and we're taking a bunch of money off your books. That to me is where the value of that trade would be from Seattle, and also the fact that Castillo is just a little bit older now. He is.
Yeah.
Like Luis Castillo is going to be turning, how old is he going to be right now? He's going to be turning 32 years old. He's thrown 700 innings since the 2021 season. 2 years in a row, his velo's gone down from 97 to 96, and that last year, 96 and 95. It's not red flags with Luis Castillo. I would call them yellow flags. And I think that's something that if you're a team like the Mariners, who probably still has a top 5 rotation league with or without Luis Castillo, it makes some sense to trade him, especially because he's due $24 million each of the next 3 years. So that becomes a 3-year contract for $72 million.
Mm-hmm.
I would love to sign that for Luis Castillo if he was on the market right now. That includes a vesting option for 28, which he needs to do 180 innings and 27 for that option to vest. And he barely gets that every year as it is right now. So basically, you can't really assume that contract. I think he's an interesting one, but he's definitely not as frontline of a pitcher as Crochet. But you're giving up significantly less to get him.
Yes. Luis Castillo, I don't think is necessarily a traditional ace anymore like we thought he was maybe a couple years ago, but he would be a great guy to be at the top of the rotation with Kodai Senga. Would love to have Luis Castillo again in another hitter-friendly ballpark. I know Seattle is a pitcher-friendly ballpark. That's what I meant to say. Cincinnati was the hitter-friendly ballpark. Mm-hmm. Citi Field, we know, does some really good stuff for pitchers as well.
And it was cool because when he went from Cincinnati to Seattle, Seattle kind of reworked his whole repertoire for what they thought would work better in Seattle specifically. Because when he was in Cincinnati, he was big on the sinker, change up, keep the ball in the ground as much as possible. He was pushing 55, almost 60% ground ball rates when he was at his best. Coming to Seattle, he started throwing significantly more four-seam fastballs, throwing them more up in the zone, willing to get fly balls because a fly ball in Cincinnati is way more valuable than a fly ball in Seattle. So you're willing to get them there. Citi Field will play the same. Not as 100% pitcher friendly, but still quite pitcher friendly. But you saw last year when the velocity went down with that system he was running, where it was just high fastballs, that the whiff rates went down across all of his pitches. When that fastball wasn't getting strike one as much, wasn't getting swings and misses as much, it was easy for hitters to adjust in at bats to go from the fastball to the breaking stuff. With that, his slider kind of flattened out too. Stuff Plus hated it last year. Wasn't as sweepy of a pitch. And his changeups had a few inches of run on it, which I think Castillo was always his best when that changeup was a little bit more straight up and down, and he was able to throw it evenly against hitters from both sides of the plate. So there probably is some tinkering. There's probably just is some aging. He also has a full no trade clause, but I think a guy like Luis Castillo would revel in an opportunity to come to New York. I think he would enjoy that. I remember seeing him when we worked for the team on the field, and he was dapping everybody up. I think he just seems like a gregarious kind of New York type of guy, but not as high of a height as you're going to get with Crochet, where you're getting like a lockdown ace on day one, but you're going to trade significantly less to acquire Luis Castillo in exchange for taking that money back.
Yes, because the money, the Mariners, that's the value that the Mariners are getting rid of. They're going, we got rid of all this money that we can now spend on other things, and bringing up Luis Castillo as well. That full no trade clause is just totally so that he can have control. That's a player thing. I don't want you. You're probably. It almost seems like he's like, you're probably going to eventually want to trade me because there's so much money and you're the Mariners. I at least get to decide where I go. You're not going to trade me to the Kansas City Royals or something like that.
No, not the Kansas City Royals probably would make that trade because this. But even like that's a good thing to bring up. Kansas City Royals. We saw today. All the qualifying offers got given out, and they're giving out to pitchers who a lot of people didn't expect to get them. Nick Pivetta, Nick Martinez. The Royals are giving Michael Wacha 3 at $17 million per. If you could get Luis Castillo at 3 at $24 million per, that's in terms of where the market is right now for pitching, which gives the Mariners some leverage, of course. It helps a lot. And again, you probably get Castillo for Brett Baty and someone else quite good, trying to place who could be in my mind right now, but I guess it would just depend on them if they want a pitcher or hitter. I think you probably avoid the top prospects, but it would probably be like Beatty and Nolan McLean. Get them a pitcher was a wicked piece of marble and a third baseman who could play right now.
I think the Mariners would love to get their hands on Nolan McLean and see what he could do out there too.
Yeah, so also piece of marble, piece of clay was what I meant there. Horrible, but I think that the acquisition cost wouldn't be crazy there. I think he would be a really realistic and really solid option for the Mets.
I'm going to tee this one up to you. We got a hitter coming up next. We need to talk about this. This is your little baby that you've been posting all over the place. Tell us about Nolan Arenado.
I think a lot of you guys quit on Nolan Arenado a little too soon. I don't know. There's just something. This isn't as much of a number thing. This isn't as much of a thing I can point to like X, Y, Z, blah, 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 like with the pitching. It's just in last year, I said this a couple of episodes ago, the whole Cardinals team fell apart. They never really got out of the gate in April, and by the time June came around, they were a complete clusterfuck, an absolute disaster, and never got back. And Nolan Arenado and Paul Goldschmidt were two of the guys who really fell down, sunk with that ship. And for both of them, Goldschmidt was really more of a power thing, where Arenado's never really had the peak power numbers. He's never been a great barrel guy. He's never been a great exit velocity guy. That's why people always gave him like the Coors Merchant kind of tag. It always seemed like he was kind of benefiting from external factors. But then his first couple of years at St. Louis, he was still an elite hitter, top of the line. Definitely wasn't Colorado Arenado. Also, he was in his 30s now. As the year went on, pitch selections really fell apart for Arenado. He was letting more pitches go in the heart of the zone. He wasn't being as selective of pitches in the shadow. He wasn't really able to find his pitch. And when you're a guy like Arenado, who I would call him having selective power, I think oddly the power for Nolan Arenado is similar to that of Alex Bregman, where it's just about being able to like scoop that baseball, pull that fly ball, and get it to that spot. Citi Field's going to have a much kinder left field than Busch Stadium is for Nolan Arenado. And that all comes back to mental for me with that pitch selection. You're squeezing the bat too tight. You're in a veteran team. Things are not working out well. You really see yourself slipping in the standings. You feel like you have to do more because you're one of the leaders. You're making a ton of money. I remember he had a walk-off. I think it was against the Pirates in like August or July. They had a couple walk-offs against the Pirates weirdly in July. So shout out to Cardinals for helping me win that Pirates bet over you. But you could see how happy he was just to hit. It was a walk-off grand slam, and he murdered the baseball. And like the whole team mobbed him. It was just like you could feel like an exalting off it, kind of like the Vientos walk-off home run when he first came up to the team, where it felt like it was special because it was a walk-off, but it was a little bit extra special because of Nolan Arenado doing it in that moment. It feels very mental to me right now. This is a guy who has his superstar pedigree for a career on the line. This is a guy who could, if he put together 2 more elite years with another Gold Glove and possibly hoist a World Series trophy, now is in a different category of like all-time baseball guys. Gets himself into a Hall of Fame conversation where right now he's someone who could just be forgotten in the next decade. There's a lot in the line for a guy who I know is willing to work hard and knows is going to be just a dog in the clubhouse and on the field, still plays elite defense. It seems like a good match to me.
Mets fans hate Nolan Arenado. Like, it's so funny where if you asked him when he was on Colorado, you're like, oh my God, Nolan Arenado, next David Wright at third base for the Mets. Now that he's been a Cardinal for the last few years, I feel like Mets fans hate him. The thing with Nolan Arenado too, Cardinals are looking to sell. They don't want to spend all this money. He has a lot of money on the books. He would probably be free. We probably would give up almost nothing to if we took Nolan Arenado's full contract. And his full contract right now, I'm going to say it out loud and you're going to be like, it's not the worst. It could become the Robinson Cano pumpkin where you're like, oh shit, why did we ever take this? What were we thinking? But if you give up nothing, part of the Robinson Cano problem was we thought we gave up a generational player in Jared Kelenic. That ended up not being the case. But for Nolan Arenado, he's due $32 million in 2025, $27 million in 2026. But $5 million in both of those years are covered by the Colorado Rockies. So it goes from 27 to 22. That's $49 million the next 2 years. And then his third and final year of his contract is $15 million, which is really cheap. 3 years, $64 million for Nolan Arenado is what the Mets would be on the hook for if they took the entire thing from the St. Louis Cardinals. It is hard to find a guy who is going to be playing Gold Glove elite defense at third base along with an elite shortstop, which would be amazing defense back there. And a guy who, like you said, as weird as it seems, like he has slowed down a ton. There are concerns with his play. He's 34. It was not good last year. It was not good the year before. He had 16 home runs. That is concerning. But for a team like the Mets who has the opportunity and this money, I think it's worth a shot at least, or at least exploring the idea.
And it all depends, of course, how the rest of free agency rattles down for the Mets.
Yes, because
you might not want to put $20 million back on the books.
This only happens if you don't have Pete Alonso, because then Mark Vientos goes to first base, and then you need a third baseman. And Nolan Arenado is better than what Brett Beatty and Ronnie Mauricio are probably going to give you right now.
At least a little bit more sure, or at least a situation where you don't have to rely on them to be the everyday guy. Yes, much higher floor, because you want to go into next season expecting to contend for a championship. That's where this Mets team, this organization, this franchise is right now. And I just think Arenado gets you closer. Again, this is not without risk. He also was, 3 years younger than Cano at the time of that deal? 4 years younger than Cano? Cano was also having better years in his mid-30s because he was on steroids, and Arenado's had the last few years. But to me, there's a tiny, even if it's a dead fish bump, even if we get one more monster year out of Arenado,
be worth it. Yeah,
there's something here to me. I can't believe it's that over right now.
No, I'm with you. I'd be interested in Arenado at least to consider bringing him into third base on the team. But again, that's if you don't get Pete Alonso, and there's other things that have to happen. Fourth guy, a little less interesting, but we're going to go to the bullpen because, of course, it's Mets'd up.
I think it's interesting.
People like to hear bats and starting pitchers. They don't get excited about the guy who might be our eighth inning dude in Devin Williams, because the Brewers declined his option, which means he's going to arbitration for the final year of his contract.
It looks ugly.
It looks ugly. That's just a signal of, hey, we want to trade this dude. He has off the field issues. He broke his hand. Apparently goes out like crazy. Like, he likes to have a good time, it seems, and is maybe not 100% focused on baseball. Bringing him to New York is a little bit scary, hearing that, because Milwaukee can't be nearly as fun as New York City is. I've never been to Milwaukee, but I've been here. It's a great city. That's concerning. But on the field, tough to find a better reliever in Major League Baseball.
Definitely. And the Brewers just, again, want to get out from under him because he's turning 30 this year. He's going to be a free agent next year. He's going to get a little bit of a bump in pay this year, his third year of arbitration. I think it might be his fourth year of arbitration. He could have been a Super 2 guy if I remember correctly, but he's going to make anywhere between like $8 and $10 million, depending how that works out. Too early to tell. I don't have a good arbitration calculator in front of me, but he's still an elite pitcher. He still is. And the Brewers know from within that they can always make the next great relief pitcher. So they don't really give a shit. They really, truly don't care about a guy like Devin Williams. I don't think you can get him for nothing like we're talking about some of these other guys, but I think you can trade Blade Tidwell.
Okay. A major
Devin
league
Williams.
Close pitcher.
Yeah, major league adjacent pitcher who looks like a back rotation guy without ace upside who could probably finagle a little bit. Like he reminds me of some of these other pitchers that the Brewers have gotten the last few years, where we can make a little repertoire out of this guy. And I think that's just, to them, they're like, wow, like it's honestly really similar to Robert Gosser for Josh Hader. Kind of the exact same thing right there. I think Gosser even's a little bit more exciting than Blade as a prospect.
Is it Gosser or Gasser?
Oh, maybe Gasser. I don't know.
Whatever. Say it doesn't matter. He's a whatever.
Yeah, Robert Gasser. He came from the Padres to the Brewers, the Josh Hader trade 3 years ago now. But it's similar where they're like, all right, it's 1 year of a reliever or 6 years of a pitcher. To them, that's just an easy nexus for them. And we understand that David Stearns is willing to make trades to the Brewers. He made the Adrian Hauser, Tyrone Taylor trade last year. It was quick and painless and very easy. I think that the Mets are going to need to get creative to add to this bullpen. They probably do want to get one more like monster, dominant, trustworthy guy, but not pay up for any of the free agent ones. And I think Devin Williams, some other guys we're going to mention, honorable mentions, make a lot of sense for that.
Definitely. Last guy that we're going to give his own little talk to here, not necessarily the most exciting name, but to me, Cedric Mullins feels like the perfect platoon center fielder to rock with Tyrone Taylor going into this next year. And he's going to be cheaper than Harrison Bader was basically last year. Bader got $10 million. Cedric Mullins is probably going to get around that $10-ish million range in arbitration. And he's a really good defensive center fielder, fantastic out there. His bat has not been as good as his breakout year a couple years ago with the Orioles. And you are going to a much less hitter-friendly ballpark for a left-handed hitter from Baltimore to Citi Field. But the defense and just being a better hitter than what we were running out pretty much every single day in center field for most of the year, those 400 at-bats, seems like worth it to me, and I can't imagine it's going to cost much. The Orioles have way too many outfielders. They have to get rid of them at some point.
And Mullins is someone who I don't like using like halves of a season to like be like, oh, this guy's definitely going to be better next year. But it was an abysmal first 2 months, and he really got himself together in the second half. Wasn't above league average hitter for the last 2 full months of the season. Still played a really good defensive center field. Doesn't swing and miss very often. Fast guy. Another way to just add some good like pop of athleticism to this lineup. And oddly enough, when the Orioles did move all those fences back, I guess it was right field was fine for him. Doesn't really matter. But it's a little complete ball player for a guy who's on 1 year of team control, who's going to be due probably a $2-3 million raise, and they don't really care to pay that anyway because they have to pinch their pennies to fill out the edges of their roster anyway. I just don't think they want to pay Cedric Mullins $8.5 million, and they have a heap of talent every single position on the field, and he's 30 years old. You could probably get him for less than expected, but the only thing is with trading with the Orioles that you have to trade something of major league caliber to get him.
But maybe you don't. I don't know if you have to. They have so many major league caliber guys. They're moving Mullins because they have no room for major league caliber guys.
But you still don't. The Orioles are like, we like our prospects because they're our prospects. Like if we get you from the beginning, you don't have any bad habits. Like if you spend time with any of these other organizations, we know more than everybody else.
You think they don't like any prospects in the entire Mets organization? They're like, they're not an organization. Get rid of them. I think you're overreacting here.
No, I think truthfully, a lot of these teams would rather have I think it's like kind of the reverse of what the Rays like to do sometimes. They're like, we like to get something that's kind of close to being fully made, but then make a little adjustment. I think the Orioles love working from the ground up. They seem to be so steadfast in these last few years.
Do we have any white guys with blonde hair that goes down to like your just below your ears? Because they do love that look.
Yeah, Brett Beatty, and he would get laughed at that infield by the rest of the guys that play baseball there. But not to talk shit about Beatty. But I just think you probably have to get interesting and send them a pitcher that can probably contribute, which I don't even know who that is for the Mets.
I don't know. I don't think the price is going to be that high. I really don't.
I don't think so either. But I think it's just a weird match. Maybe okay. Maybe we just need a third team to come in there. Love to execute their 3-team trade.
A good 3-team trade gets me going. All right, some honorable mentions for guys that we did not put fully in today's video but are interesting. Jacob deGrom will not be traded to the New York Mets.
0% chance. No, Jacob deGrom is a full no-trade clause. He's due $40 million next year. I don't think anybody on earth would want to pay that. And also, with the full no-trade clause, like we were on the inside a little bit. We know that relationship was not very good by the end. I think a lot of Mets fans get a warm, fuzzy feeling from deGrom. I do too. I love deGrom. He'll be one of my favorite players I've ever watched play baseball my entire life. I don't think the Mets and deGrom like each other very much, and I don't think there's any chance of there ever being a reunion, even 1 iota.
Yeah, unless for some reason the Rangers will pay his entire contract. I think that's how it happens.
Yeah, or unless the Mets move cities.
Yeah, I think that might be the whole thing. Another pitcher name to mention, Sonny Gray. He has a full no-trade clause. Feels like he might just not like New York based on his time here.
Yeah, could see it. Could see that possibly being the case. Another one who also comes from the Cardinals, Ryan Helsley. All the same kind of things we talked about with Devin Williams last year. Teams trying to shed some money. He's incredible. I might even think right now in a vacuum he's better than Devin Williams, and he's going to be cheap. And you've hung out with him? And I've hung out with him. He's a great guy. He's a hell of a dude. I tailgated with him for Ohio State Michigan game a few years ago. But he's awesome. He just might cost a tiny bit more because he is cheaper and he's better. But I think still within the same range, you could definitely acquire Ryan Helsley because the Cardinals look like they're broke. Mets
will not get Luis Robert. I don't think there's any scenario you get him. Josh Naylor's a name I would love to have on the Mets if we don't have Pete Alonso. I'd be very happy with him being first base DH for this team. He's a really good ball player. He's on his last year of arbitration. He's going to get paid.
lots of Mets fans would be really upset to learn how streaky Josh Naylor is, because he's one of the
Oh, yeah.
streakiest players in baseball. And you're going to have
Oh.
a 3-week stretch where he doesn't get a hit. You're going to be like, this guy fucking sucks. But no, he's good. But it goes up and down a lot.
Any other names you want to throw out there, James, for the people at home?
I mean, my guy, Eric Fetty, of course. Eric Fetty's similar in a 1-year, $10 million in this Cardinals team that's going to be pinching their little pennies because they don't have an RSN anymore. They've lost their TV deal, or they're going to be losing it soon. He's going to be someone available. A couple other relievers I think are quite interesting. David Bednar, the Pirates just are always willing to shed some money from a reliever in arbitration to get some more pieces back. I think Emmanuel Clase might get traded.
Whoa.
I think he's got one more year left, and the Guardians, that's kind of how they roll. I could see that happening. Pete Fairbanks, similar. Other pitchers. Jeffrey Springs has 3 more years left. I put him on here, but maybe we don't see it happening now. And as far as pitchers, that kind of feels like the rest. Maybe then Chris Paddock, the last one's a mid-rotation option, kind of similarly to Eric Fetty, because the Twins are another team that seems to desperately willing to shed money because of what's going on with their TV package. But pitching-wise, that's kind of all I have. Do you have any other hitters for the people? Oh, and also you mentioned the other day, I think Reed Detmers could actually get moved.
Yeah,
he's in arbitration, and the Angels just love to do dumb things.
Yeah, they're stupid. You could, confuse them. So I'm Marte for Reed Detmers. Who says no? I want to mention Brent Rooker. I want him. I want Brent Rooker. I know you don't think he's going to get traded. He probably won't. But if he's available, I'd love to knock on the A's door and see if we can get him. And also Ryan Mountcastle, I'm interested too. Only, again, if there's no Pete Alonso playing first base. I think Ryan Mountcastle is going to pop off when he leaves Baltimore.
Yeah, I think Brent Rooker will be traded in 1 year, just not this one. Just 3 years of team control versus 2 years of team control. I think it's a big difference in value. No one's paying for that guy.
Last sneaky one, keep an eye out for Leody Taveras, too. He has no space in Texas. He's
Yeah,
a
center
defensive
field
outfielder with a left-handed bat. Another platoon option for Tyrone Taylor.
Yeah, and in a world where Pete Alonso has not come back to the Mets, I could see Yandy Diaz from the Rays or Nathaniel Lowe from the Rangers both being traded. Both just consistent, steady guys, not going to be sexy, but they'll hit 6th, and you'll be like, oh, nice. I'm happy his at-bat's being taken right now.
Yes, 100%. But that's it. Those are the 5 players we think the Mets must trade for this offseason. Let us know in the comment section who you guys think is the most important player the Mets could trade for. Remember to drop a like on the video. If you're watching on YouTube, subscribe over there, Mets'd Podcast. And if you're listening, we appreciate you. Apple Podcasts, Spotify, Google, whatever it is. Drop us a rating, drop us a review, download, and subscribe. We will catch you guys all. I don't know. We're just releasing episodes whenever we want. So keep an eye out for them.
We'll probably see you this week.
Yeah, another time. All right, peace.
Peace out, guys. See you next time. Let's go, Mets.